Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of The Learning Curve with Valley Anesthesia. We're here today with Dr. Howie Goodwin, and we are going to talk to him about his aesthetics practice. A little bit about Dr. Goodwin. He's been practicing in nurse anesthesia. He is faculty at Old Dominion in their nurse anesthesia program. And he teaches primarily in simulation. He's the director of technology for the entire school. So he's got an extensive history of simulation. And he also has his own business on the side in aesthetics. And we know aesthetics is something that's really up and coming, and we're seeing some CRNAs move into that field. So we wanted to kind of get an idea of what is happening in aesthetics these days. So, Dr. Goodwin, good morning.
Hey, Michelle, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us this morning. And can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you decided to go into aesthetics, sort of how you background check things and decided maybe this was something for you if somebody else is out there thinking about doing the same thing?
Sure. Yeah, I've been practicing for almost 15 years as a CRNA and developed my own anesthesia practice. I really started working independent in 2014 and then an anesthesia business with a partner in 2017. And as that grew, we decided to expand, and we actually moved into the ketamine infusion world for a little while there. And just to supplement revenue from that standpoint, we added aesthetics and IV vitamin infusions. And then we suddenly realized that we were getting more traction on the aesthetics piece than any of the other service lines. So after a couple of years, we transitioned out of the ketamine business. We ended up actually closing that entity, and I opened up an independent med spa from that business and started doing just straight aesthetics because the market there is much more. There's more opportunities, I should say, and it's not quite the lift for some of the other practices that involve things like ketamine and controlled substances.
So I know you practice in Virginia. So what are the requirements in Virginia if you wanted to have a med spa? I know it varies from state to state, so you'd probably advise people to look into what is the requirements in their state. For instance, what is the requirement in Virginia?
Yeah, that's a question. Since I've been involved with the Virginia Association for quite some time, and I've done a lot of government relations work and a lot of legislative work. So I get that question most frequently. Basically, the statute is vague and very generic. We do have supervision requirements in Virginia. Supervision is very open, though. We have 3 provider types that can supervise us, either physician, podiatrist, or dentist. And supervision is not defined in the code. So however you can demonstrate that supervision is occurring, then as long as it's within that realm, then, and it seems reasonable, then it's within the code of the law. So if we look at the medical side, it really is very limited as far as what they look at as supervision requirements for advanced practice providers. They don't tease out PAs or nurse practitioners. That's the other piece. In Virginia, CRNAs are considered nurse practitioners. The only requirement there is that a provider, a dentist, podiatrist, or physician can only supervise up to 6 advanced practice providers simultaneously. They can supervise more than 6, they just can't be operating at the same time. So that part of the law is a little more vague, and there's really not much check and balance there, but you have to make sure whoever you partner with from a medical director standpoint also understands the limitation as far as the number of providers they can supervise.
So you would count at your, so you have a medical director at your med spa.
I do.
And then anytime you're working there, that counts as one of the people he's supervising. And he would just have to be aware that he cannot be supervising 6 other CRNAs at the hospital that day.
Or 6 of any advanced providers. So that could be PAs, nurse practitioners, or CRNAs, even
Okay.
midwives and CNSs.
So it's okay that there's you're not in the same location.
Yeah, there's no specificity as far as location. Like Florida, you have to be your supervising physician technically has to be within 75 miles of, or 75 minutes, I think is how they define it, of the location. The minutes may be a little different there, but they have to be within a certain radius. Whereas here, there is no definition of radius. They don't even technically have to be in the state. There's no definition of that in the code.
Okay. And then is there, from a business owner standpoint, is there a regulation? I know these vary from state to state too. When my husband and I had our business in California, just depending upon if you wanted to call it a medical service versus nursing service, there were certain requirements. Like we were always, our anesthesia services corporation had to be filed under nursing, so we had to have nursing in the name of our corporation. So there's little things like that too. What is the requirement in Virginia for that?
None. There's absolutely no requirements for you to kind of specify your name or entity in such a way that identifies it as a nurse-driven practice. Because we have the supervision regulation, those rules are pretty lenient when it comes to the Commonwealth of Virginia. So you don't really have to worry about that so much.
Okay.
It is a practice-friendly state from that standpoint. It's pretty easy to open a practice. You just have to make sure you fulfill that medical director spot. And based on that medical director position, that's what you're going to need on file. They'll have to have that information registered with the state so that you can do your pharmaceutical ordering.
That brings up another good question. So to do your pharmaceutical ordering in Virginia, do you have a separate license to order pharmaceuticals? Does that automatically come with your license? You apply for that?
I do have a DEA number, but it's not a requirement in my situation. One, we're not having controlled substances, so we don't have to worry about that so much. So everything is usually ordered under the medical director DEA. There are some pharmacies that are okay with using my DEA, and I give them that, but it's not necessary as long as your supervising physician is okay with you utilizing their DEA number.
Okay, great. Well, we kind of jumped ahead of ourselves there, I guess, with those questions, because I was originally going to ask you how you sort of got interested in, you did mention that you were doing ketamine and then decided to add the aesthetics. That isn't something that normally CRNAs are involved in, but it definitely is a growing area. We're seeing the AANA, they're doing their first workshop now on aesthetics. How did that come to be? Did you have patients requesting that from you? Just tell us how you got into that a little bit.
So we had some CRNAs in the area that we're bringing a trainer to town, and they called me up and they asked if I would be interested. And so I'd known about CRNAs going into aesthetics. I didn't know a lot about aesthetics or specifically injectables at that point. So I began to research it, began to try to figure out what makes people good at it and what makes people not so good at it. And then trying to figure out if that's a nuance that I would be happy with. And surprisingly, when I dug into it, I realized that it's very much science to it and some art as well. So, lots of physics, understanding the physics of the face and the musculature, and understanding the dynamic responses that you're going to get when you inject, and then understand geometric proportioning. So I started to nerd out a little bit on it, and really enjoy that stuff. So I was like, well, sure, let's give it a shot and let's see, it'll be worth the investment. And I don't know, I think I paid $4,000 or $5,000 to go get trained, which sounds like a lot, but in the big scheme of things, for a field like that, you're going to pay for what you get. So if you're paying for a $699 online Botox course, you're going to get a recorded course that has not been updated and not necessarily the relationships that are necessary for you to thrive in the industry. So I went to a 2-day course. I did Botox injections, business aesthetics one day, and that was about 12 hours. And then the next day was about 8 hours of dermal filler training. And then obviously you don't walk out, you feel okay with Botox, you don't walk out feeling great about dermal fillers. So really you begin to network as quick as possible and develop relationships with reps that'll give you additional training when you buy products and all that stuff. And you begin to develop more hands-on training as you do that. And then there's times that you go and pay for additional training. And so, at this point, I haven't really had to pay for much training. I'm about to pay for some training to learn some cannula techniques and sculpture injections and all that. But that's how it grows. That's how you learn the skill. You get introduced to multiple trainers along the way. They all have, just like in anesthesia, everybody has their own technique. In aesthetics, it's the same way. Now, part of that is because a lot of people are learning on the job with aesthetics, so they kind of figure out things on their own, which is not the safest. But that's why you're getting their expertise, is so that you develop a safer approach to your injections along the way. So,
where do you find those first patients that you start injecting on? I know you're learning on them, right? So
I can't remember if I told you this story or not, but when I first started, it was friends and family, and they were very kind and loving and generous to me and allowing me to stick needles in their face. So, and so I remember the first Christmas after I learned how to inject, I lined up my nieces and my sister-in-law and my wife, and we injected. We had a Botox party Christmas morning. So we're sitting around and probably not doing it the way we were supposed to, but we were learning how to do Botox on Christmas, and they were happy because that was my gift to them for Christmas, and they didn't have to pay for their Botox that Christmas. So anyway.
So do people typically, when they're learning and they get friends and family, they're doing it sort of gratis to get that experience? Is that something someone should budget for?
I try the folks that weren't friends and family that wanted to be a model for me to learn on. I charge them basically half price, and that's enough to cover the product. So really, that's the technique they teach people in training, is to have them pay for basically the product, because you're learning the skill. So they're not really paying for skill at that point.
How many patients do you think you have to do? I'm sure it's different for the different procedures, but to feel like you really understand what's going on and you can troubleshoot. I mean, I realize, in anesthesia, we probably don't feel that way until maybe 5 years into our careers, and we've had our 10,000 hours of practice. Do you kind of feel like it's as steep in aesthetics as it is in anesthesia, or?
Well, not really. I don't think it's quite the depth of knowledge that we have to have for anesthesia, because we're targeting just muscles and essentially paralytics for those muscles. So we're paralyzing those muscles or inactivating those muscles for a period of 3 months, roughly, depending on what we're using. And I always tell people, start with upper face injections, the traditional injecting the 11s, going across to the corrugators and then the frontalis muscle. And then once you get pretty good at that, start injecting other areas. Crow's feet is another big area. So anything basically from the side of the eyes and up is fairly simple. And if as long as you stay out of the areas that we tell you not to go into, and when I train some folks, we have something called no-fly zone. Well, it's no-fly zone most of the time. Every once in a while, we may inject a little something in there, but I tell brand new injectors don't touch that until you're comfortable with the mechanics of the muscles of everything else. I think after 10, 12 injections, most of the forehead area and crow's feet you're confident in, especially after you've been trained thoroughly and done some hands-on injection with the trainer there. With filler's a different beast. We have complications with filler that could be complex, including vascular occlusions. And that's a little more complicated to deal with. You have to have reversal agents that are expensive. And you have to be able to identify those problems immediately, and keep an eye on them, and then exercise judgment as to how to treat accordingly. So filler is a much larger learning curve. I have to say, I've been injecting filler for almost 3 years now, and there's still times I'm phoning a friend to try to get some guidance and direction. Maybe following someone's online paid subscription services to kind of review their techniques to make sure I stay on top of identifying and troubleshooting problems along the way. But with Botox, for the most part, or Botox products, I should say, lowercase b, it's fairly simple. Some of the lower face injections, you can kind of create some asymmetry, but it's not permanent and lasting, right? So that stuff will fatigue and you don't have to worry about it so much. But like I said, filler's a different beast.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we read about complications in aesthetics, they're usually largely related to filler issues. So if I was interested in starting, you've told me I need to get my training, pay for my training. Don't be cheap about it, because you're going to get what you pay for. And then during the process of training, it's all about networking, and meeting those reps and making those connections. That allows you to get even more training that you may or may not have to pay for, but those guys are the experts. So you always want to have them around. Then I need some startup costs for, getting my baseline experience. And then what if I wanted to open up shop? So what does it take to hang out a shingle? We have already kind of talked about all the different licensing that we have to go through. But if I wanted to hang out a shingle, at some point, you got to make enough revenue to pay for that space. So what are you looking at cost wise so you can be successful and be there a year later?
Right. So that's the piece that I think surprises folks when they get in the middle of this, because they already paid $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for training, and they haven't even walked away with any product to inject with. Now, a lot of times at those training events, you can buy a couple vials of product. Vials of product cost up to $500 a vial, depending on what you're getting. So they could spend another $1,000 just to get a couple hundred units of product to do their initial injections. I think that's a good idea to go ahead and buy that from your trainer, simply because getting access to some of the products is a little tedious sometimes. It takes a little finesse. You have to have a medical practice to deliver, or a business to deliver the product to. And odds are, if you're taking the class for the first time, you don't have a practice to deliver it to. So you got to build those relationships, find some place to deliver it. If you're going to do an in-home party kind of business concept, which most people start that way. And then once they grow to an X number, usually at least 100 to 200 regular clients, then you decide, okay, I'm going to rent a retail space or medical office space to inject folks on a regular basis. So that's the cheapest way to do it. The entry point for that, I would guess, is somewhere around $15,000. You have to have medical malpractice. You have to check to make sure Your malpractice covers both you and your medical director if you're in a state that needs a medical director. If you're the medical director, depending on the state, then you only have to worry about malpractice coverage for yourself and anyone else injecting under your practice. And there's lots of options out there. Most states ANA's coverage will cover it. If not, there's some other great folks that can find you a policy to cover specifically med spas. And remember, med spa coverage, you have to really delineate what is the insurance company covering? Are they covering just Botox type injections? Are they covering fillers? Are you going to add other services like microneedling, skincare, advanced medical grade skincare, peels, things like that? So you have to kind of tweak your insurance policy as you grow and add services, so that increases the cost, right? Everything that we do changes the cost structure. It's not a one price fits all kind of situation. Then you have to buy the product. The product, depending on what you get and the volume you're buying, it could cost you. I just placed an order for a product, and it cost me. It was not Botox. It was not Zeman. It was another product. Ended up average cost is going to be $333 a vial. The retail price on that vial is like $525 or something. So only because I bought the volume I did did I get the price reduced by almost $200. If you're only buying two to 5 or 2 to 6 vials or 2 to 10 vials, you'll probably pay full price for that product. So you have to keep that in mind. So if you're paying full price, that's another $5,000 or $6,000 right there. So let's say $2,000 or $3,000 for your malpractice, $5,000 or $6,000 for your initial supplies of tox. So right there, you're already at $9,000, and then you add on top of that your other equipment, face cleanser of some sort, alcohol pads, syringes, all that stuff. That's a few $100s, and then bacteriostatic saline to mix your product. So as you can see, just basic costs so far without going overboard with the website and all that is already at $10,000. And then if you add a website and you have someone else develop it, that's probably another $2,000 to $5,000, depending on what you're having them do from a management standpoint or a hosting standpoint. So, and then you have to figure out your social media. You have to set up your LLC if you haven't done that already. I always tell people 15,000 is probably a good budget to start with. And that's if you don't have a location to lease. If you don't have a location to lease, then I wouldn't even worry about filler until you can add that location, because you need reversal agents. Reversal agents have to be refrigerated. They're expensive. So I would wait until you get the clientele numbers to lease the space before you move into the filler market.
What do you think okay, before I ask that question, so on a regular basis to your space, what are you spending monthly, and how do you have that staffed? Because I'm sure as you add staff, then you have to, depending upon their work week, have to add benefits. I know there's overhead, turning on the lights, so to speak. What do you think that monthly overhead is for somebody?
Yeah, for me, I can tell you what we're doing and go from there. We have a medical grade office, so which means it's usually a Class A or Class B real estate listing. So you pay a little bit more per square foot. Depending on the state, it could be $21, $22 a square foot. It could be $30 a square foot. For us, it's about $23 a square foot. So that alone is a couple $1,000s a month for a small space. And then on top of that, you have the additional expenses of internet, and depending on your utilities and cleaning requirements, then that could increase your costs as well. And then you have the cost of product. Well, depending on where you're at in purchasing, your cost of product could be up to 50%. You always want to try to get that below 30% based on the numbers, and really 25% is ideal. But when you start small, you're going to pay, that's going to be a larger percentage of your costs. Right now, it's just my wife and I that manage the practice. We don't have any employees. And between our services that we have for search engine optimization, scheduling, including our EMR, our website hosting, and management of our Google business accounts and all that stuff. You know, plus cost of product. I think our overhead monthly is about, well, to break even, we have to generate about 10,000 in revenue monthly. So that'll give you an idea of where you need to be able to move to when you lease a space. You want a pretty high quality space to be in. We're probably a little higher quality than what you absolutely need. You can certainly rent salon space or something like that. That's a little bit cheaper option, but you still have your product cost and all that. So up front, your first move should be in a small location that's yours, that can be locked, and then go from there, because you can minimize your monthly expenses, down to probably 7,000 or 8,000 if you go with a smaller space.
Okay. And what do you think is the biggest mistake someone makes, thinking, oh yeah, I want to do that, and then just sort of doesn't really think everything through?
Yeah, some of it is people want to run before they walk, and they want to walk before they crawl. So start small and slow and steady, and then kind of grow as your clientele grows, and they'll tell you what they'll create the demand in the area in which you need to grow next, right? So if you have a lot of people asking questions about filler, like lip filler is a popular option, then that's the first place you're going to go with filler. You're not going to look at cheek filler maybe, because you don't have as many people talking about that. Now you may look at your clients and you may say, you could use cheek filler before I do lip filler. And that's up to the relationship and conversation that you develop with your client. But those are the two basic things. You need a soft filler for lips. You need a more robust filler for the cheeks. And beyond that, there's some finesse products in between, but that's a good place to start. But I think the biggest issue people run into is buying too much product. Especially for us, skincare was a big thing that we jumped all in. And we made a huge skincare order, and we probably only sold 25% of the skincare that we ordered because of expiration dates. Which not all skincare has expiration dates, but probably 70% of it has expiration dates, right? So you have to recognize that you're probably not going to move a lot of skincare products up front. So do a minimum order, even though it doesn't give you the best deal. And the best deal is not a good deal if you end up eating the cost, right? So kind of make sure you go small on that stuff, order minimum quantities for each of the products. I will say order enough product from an injectable standpoint to get the free training that they'll offer, and your rep will be transparent about that and communicate it with you. They probably won't send a trainer out if you're only buying one vial of tox, but if you buy 10 vials, they'll probably send a trainer to you and spend a couple hours of training. So just kind of keep that stuff in mind and recognize it's fluid, and something conversation and relationships you build with your reps.
Awesome. Well, we're approaching the end of our time here, so I always just like to recap everything we talked about, and you let me know if I got it right or wrong.
Sure.
But because I kind of make notes as we go along. So we talked about that you need to look at, first you got to go get, if this is something that you're interested in, you're going to have to do some training, and you're going to pay for what you get. So don't skimp on your training. Training typically runs around, you said about 5,000 for a 2-day course or so. And then training introduces you to some of those integral people that you're going to need in your life, to like the reps, and you can get additional training at no charge from some of those reps. So you definitely want to make those connections. You need to look at your state and see what the licensing is in your state, as far as, do you need to be supervised, how you need to name things, what pharmaceutical issues you may have ordering products. Do that background search. Really, the training is going to give you an in-depth knowledge of the physics of the face and the geometry and the pharmacy of how everything works. And investing in that is what is going to make you more or less successful. You can start with your friends and family, but you need about 100 to 200 regular clients before you should think about opening up shop in town. And then when you open up shop in town, you have startup expenses in addition to recurring expenses. It sounded like your startup expenses were about $15,000. That was getting your malpractice in place, finding your space, ordering enough product, and finding your medical director, and getting your website, social media, and getting incorporated if you already haven't. And then once your space is up and running, you're going to have monthly overhead, and those things include rent and utilities and your staff and your EMR, and you're looking at about $10,000 for a small practice with minimal staff. And then I thought it was interesting, the mistakes you said people make is the wrong products with no customers. So your best advice is let your customers dictate your next moves and what you should be ordering. Because if you order a lot of product, which there are incentives to order more than less, because you get a better price point on the product, in addition to you get some of those free training with product, but you also don't want to get stuck with product, because as we know, a lot of our medications expire, and that can not, obviously it's like buying something on sale with a credit card, but you never have the credit card paid off, so it wasn't really on sale.
Right.
So same kind of idea. And then really listen to your customers. What they're asking for might be the next best move, because you're going to have that customer base. And then we talked a little bit about fillers and the extra training and caution to be used with fillers, just because they do have complications that can be very, even life-threatening. I know with, some of the fillers when it gets into the vasculature. Did I get everything pretty right?
Yeah, I think so. It seems like you covered everything.
Okay. Not that you can do this all in 30 minutes. This has been years of work for you and learning, and we thank you that you're willing to sort of share some of those nuts and bolts for people who are thinking about aesthetics, because people go, yeah, I want to do that. Just like, how many nurses have you heard say, oh, I always wanted to do anesthesia. I was going to do that.
Yep.
But a lot of stuff happens between then, and people find out how much work it is, and they go, nah, I'm not.
Thank you.
Yep. So, any other pearls or anything else about aesthetics that we miss that you think is important for people to know?
I think we covered just about everything. I mean, early training, you don't have to do both days of training right away. That's the other piece, I guess I didn't really make clear. You could just do a tox training course and do a 1-day training with that. And then, when you're ready to move into filler, you could go back and do the filler course. A lot of times you're traveling to go to these, so it's more cost effective to do them both at the same time. But you're not going to touch filler for 2 years. It's probably not worth spending the money to go ahead and do a filler course early. So just kind of took that away as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks so much for spending time with us this morning, and
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it. And I know people are really going to enjoy this podcast. So,
Yep.
from Valley Anesthesia, we thank you, Dr. Goodwin, and we uh, give a shout out to everybody. It's a Friday today, so everybody have a great weekend, and thanks for using Valley.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, man.